I've always been a private person. That's part of why I've hesitated to share this story for so long. The thought of it somehow being traced back to me makes my skin crawl. But recently I realized it would be a shame to leave this earth without at least putting it out there. So here it is. I'm really stepping out of my comfort zone telling this. About 8 years ago, I was on a solo road trip from Clifton, New Jersey to Amarillo, Texas. I was heading down to see my parents, who I hadn't visited in years. I'd moved away from Amarillo long before and hadn't been back much, so the trip felt long overdue. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, maybe northern Arkansas or the edge of eastern Oklahoma, I honestly don't remember, my car started acting up. At first, I ignored it, but eventually I had no choice but to pull over. All around me was nothing but open fields, scattered trees, and an empty two-lane highway stretching behind me. I popped the hood and pretended to know what I was looking at. I didn't. I was just stalling before calling for help. I didn't even have a roadside assistance plan, which ticked me off because I knew it'd cost me a fortune. A few minutes later, I heard a vehicle pulling up behind me. It was an older, faded gray pickup with no visible front plate. The driver's door opened and out stepped a man. If I had to guess, he was late 30s, maybe early 40s, but with the worn-out look of someone who'd aged hard. He had scruffy brown hair and a patchy, uneven beard, like he hadn't trimmed it in months. The kind of guy who looked like he worked with his hands. He walked up slowly, glancing at my car as he approached. He didn't really ask if I needed help. He just assumed it, leaning over the engine before I even opened my mouth. I told him what had happened and thanked him for stopping. He said he was a mechanic, and based on how quickly he got to work, I believed him. After a minute or two of fiddling under the hood, he stepped back with an expression that didn't exactly fill me with confidence. He muttered something about needing a compression gauge. Without it, the car wasn't going anywhere. Then he glanced at his truck and said his buddy, another mechanic, might be able to bring one over. I had no clue what that even was, but he sounded genuine, so I didn't question it. He pulled out his phone, froze for a second, and then shoved it back into his pocket, saying the battery had died. He asked to borrow my phone to make the call. Without thinking twice, I handed it over. He took it with one hand, and with the other, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun. I knew immediately what was about to happen. He didn't bark or shout, he just told me to sit down on the shoulder and not do anything stupid. His voice didn't shake. He'd clearly done something like this before. I did exactly what he said. He rifled through my pockets, took my wallet, my bag from the passenger seat, even made me unlock my phone. Then he hopped back into his truck and drove off. I'd just been robbed on the side of a lonely highway. I know I'm telling it calmly now, but at the time I was livid, angrier than I've ever been in my life. Someone eventually stopped to help me, and with their guidance I was able to get my car started. They even gave me directions all the way to my parents' place so I could drive without my phone. I made it to Amarillo later that night, and despite everything, my visit with my parents was actually nice. The next few weeks were a blur of canceling cards, replacing IDs, updating passwords, and clawing my way back from what I'd lost. Annoying and time-consuming, but I eventually got most of it squared away. Fast forward 6 months. That's when everything really hit the fan. One day I got a letter from a bank I'd never heard of thanking me for opening a new line of credit. I assumed it was junk mail. Then another letter came, this time with a credit card from an electronics store in Memphis, showing over $1,200 in charges. That's when it hit me. I'd forgotten my Social Security card was in my wallet the day I got robbed. The guy now had everything he needed to become me. The next month was hell. My credit report was wrecked. Hard inquiries, new cards, balances I hadn't spent. I filed with the FTC, froze my credit, placed alerts with all 3 bureaus, even went to the police. But without a name or a license plate, they said there was nothing they could do. Then things escalated. A few weeks later, my health insurance called. Someone had received emergency care under my name at a hospital in Georgia. Records that didn't belong to me were now in my file. That was my breaking point. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I set up Google alerts for my name, monitored my credit constantly, combed through forums and social media. I even started searching Craigslist in cities where fraudulent charges had popped up. One night, I saw a listing from Jackson, Tennessee, a bunch of used power tools and electronics. Everything matched purchases made on the stolen Best Buy card. I contacted the seller casually, acting interested. After a few emails, he agreed to meet in public the next day. I thought about driving out there myself, but stopped. I didn't trust myself not to do something rash if I saw him again. Instead, I called the Jackson Police Department and practically begged them to help. Miraculously, they said the details lined up enough to investigate. The next day, after some back and forth, the guy told me he'd be in a red pickup truck. I passed that to the police and waited. Hours later, they called me. As soon as the guy spotted patrol cars near the meetup, he tried to speed off. He lost control of his truck and crashed into a ditch. He wasn't badly hurt, but it was enough for officers to get involved. According to them, he cracked almost immediately. He claimed the items weren't his, that a friend had given them to him to resell. Under pressure, he gave up names. With his cooperation, police gathered enough evidence to arrest the real culprits. It turned out there were 3 of them in total, and I wasn't their only victim. They'd been targeting travelers up and down several southern interstates. Eventually, all 3 were caught, charged, and put behind bars. Justice was served. I was taking a long road trip with my buddy Ryan to go visit some friends from our old college town. The drive was about 14 hours, and we figured splitting it between the 2 of us would make it manageable in one go. I drove the first stretch, then after about 5 hours, Ryan took over. The plan was for me to catch some sleep while he drove, but for some reason I couldn't. No matter how I shifted around, I just couldn't get comfortable. So when it was my turn to take the wheel again, I was already exhausted, probably even worse off than before Ryan drove. I managed to keep my eyes open and focus on the road, but I never once thought to check the gas gauge. We were in Ryan's old Ford, no alerts or fancy display, just a little needle pointing to empty, which I somehow never noticed. It wasn't until the car started sputtering that I realized we were out of gas. Ryan shot awake as I pulled over, and he immediately pulled out his phone to check for the nearest gas station. Turns out the closest one was a little over 3 miles up the road. Middle of nowhere, no cars in sight, just flat farmland all around us. We debated what to do, but eventually Ryan decided he'd walk it and bring back a can while I stayed with the car. Probably not the safest choice, considering it was about 12:30 at night. But calling roadside assistance for something so simple felt ridiculous. Ryan didn't seem fazed at all as he headed down the road, but within a minute, he disappeared into the dark. I sat back in the driver's seat, stewing over how dumb I felt for putting us in this situation. That's when I saw headlights coming toward me. They slowed way down as they passed, maybe 15 or 20 miles an hour on a road with a 60 miles per hour speed limit. I watched them in my side mirror, and sure enough, the car came to a crawl before pulling a sloppy 3-point turn. They came back past me again, even slower this time. Creeping along at maybe 5 miles per hour, windows aimed right at me like they were trying to get a good look inside. Then they sped up and disappeared back the way they came. My stomach sank. Something about that wasn't right. I kept my eyes glued to the highway, waiting for them to circle back. I pulled out my phone and called Ryan, just to let him know what happened and to tell him to hurry up if possible. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. Against my better judgment, I locked the car and jogged after him. It had only been maybe 10 minutes since he left, so I figured I could catch up quick. The night was dead silent. Every time I stopped jogging, the only thing I could hear was the faint ringing in my ears from the quiet. I ran for what felt like forever, maybe 15 minutes, but still no sign of Ryan. I called his phone again, and that's when I heard it. Faint ringing off the side of the road somewhere in the tall grass. A glow from his phone screen was barely visible in the dark. I froze. My whole body went tense. Ryan, I called out. No answer. I stepped closer, calling his name again. This time I heard him shout back, his voice sharp and panicked. Get down! I dropped instantly into the grass, and that's when I saw headlights approaching. The same car. They crept along the road, turning around several times, driving past us at a crawl as if searching for something or someone. We didn't move until the car finally disappeared down the highway. When it was safe, I found Ryan crouched in the grass a few feet away. He explained in a rush that the driver had stopped earlier, rolled down his window, and tried to get him into the car. When Ryan refused, the guy actually stepped out like uh, he was about to grab him. Ryan bolted, cutting off the road and hiding in the grass. That's when his phone slipped out and he didn't dare move to grab it. We made it to the gas station together, breathless and shaken, and reported everything to the police. We gave them the car description, but as far as I know, they never found the guy. Even now, I can't help but feel guilty for putting us in that position. One lesson stuck with me though. I'll never let the tank run low again. It happened back before cell phones were common. And I was a mom in my early 30s who had just driven my two youngest kids to the pediatrician. The clinic, in a small town outside of Valdosta, Georgia, was a little over an hour from our home. My oldest stayed back with my husband while I took the baby, just over a year old, and my 3-year-old to their checkups. Because we lived so far out, the office usually gave us the last appointments of the day, which I appreciated. This particular day, the doctor had just moved into a new building off a recently finished spur of the highway, an isolated area surrounded by empty lots and pine trees. The facility was beautiful compared to his old office, but it sat far back from the road. When I pulled in, there were maybe 4 other cars in the lot. I parked my maroon Grand Cherokee near the front door, unbuckled the kids, and went inside. After about an hour of waiting, we finally saw the doctor, paid our bill, and stepped back out. Mine was the only vehicle left. As I loaded the kids into their seats, the receptionist locked the glass doors behind us. When I turned the key to start the Jeep, it made a strange clicking noise and wouldn't start. Sighing, I gathered the children again and knocked on the door until someone let us back inside. I asked to borrow the phone to call a garage. Using the phone book, I found a service station about 15 miles away. The man I spoke to said he could come, but it might take a while. I gave him the address, then took the kids back out to the car, rolled down the windows, and buckled them in to wait. Within a few minutes, the lights in the building went dark as the last employees left. Their cars disappeared one by one around the back until we were completely alone in the park, still light out. So I dug through the diaper bag for snacks and tried to keep the kids comfortable. To my surprise, a pickup truck rolled into the lot sooner than expected. A man climbed out and gave me a quick smile. He looked middle-aged with a bit of stubble. Nothing out of the ordinary for a service station worker at the end of the day. He said he'd take a look under the hood, popped it open, and started fiddling with something. I stayed in the driver's seat with the door open, expecting him to tell me when to try the ignition. He kept poking around for a while. I asked what was wrong, and without looking at me, he said, "Just a loose wire, not the battery." More than once, he said the same thing, adding that if I just come up to the front, he could show me which one it was, so it wouldn't happen again. I smiled politely and shook my head. "I wouldn't know what I'm looking at anyway," I told him. I stayed seated with the kids, waiting. He started to sound frustrated that I wouldn't come closer. I remember thinking I didn't want to make him mad enough to leave us stranded with the sun going down. Then out of nowhere, another pickup truck pulled into the lot. As soon as it did, the man at my hood slammed it shut, sprinted to his truck, and drove off without a word. My stomach dropped. Why would he leave like that? The new truck pulled up next to me. This driver got out and immediately introduced himself. His name and voice matched the man I'd spoken to on the phone earlier. He even called me by name and apologized for the delay. He glanced toward the road and asked who the man was who had just sped off. I stared at him. "I thought that was you," I said. He frowned but didn't comment, just grabbed jumper cables from his truck and went to work. Relieved, I climbed back into the driver's seat, grateful the air conditioner would soon be on full blast for the kids. But then he appeared at my door holding something in his hands. Ma'am," he said slowly, "is this yours?" He was holding a long, thin blade-like object about 1.5 feet long. It was reddish with rust, with two small finger loops at one end, like a bizarre cross between scissors and a bayonet. I blinked in surprise and asked where he'd found it. "Under your hood," he said. I told him I'd never seen it before and marveled at how something like that could have been hidden in my car all this time. He looked pale. "These weren't buried in there," he said quietly. "They were sitting right on top, like someone just put them there." I shook my head. "But they're obviously old and rusty." "Yeah," he said, pointing, "but look how sharp they are. Those edges have just been sharpened." And sure enough, despite the rust, the tips gleamed silver. He set the object on the curb, finished with the cables, and signaled for me to start the engine. The Jeep roared to life. My 3-year-old cheered. I cranked the AC, rolled up the windows, and reached for my purse. When I stepped out to pay him, he picked up the strange object again. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't know what was about to happen here, but I'm glad I got here when I did." He told me to call the police when I got home. I didn't want to touch the item at all, but he placed it in the back through the window. We left the lot together, him turning one way and me turning the other toward the winding 2-lane highway home. I did call the Valdosta police as soon as we arrived. The officer on the phone said, based on my description, the thing sounded like a set of specialized surgical shears, which was deeply unsettling. I had tried not to touch it, thinking they could test it, but the officer didn't seem interested and told me to hang on to it just in case. I wrapped it in newspaper and stored it in the brick shed behind our house for years until we finally moved, and I threw it away rather than haul it across state lines. Around that time, women were disappearing all over South Georgia. Some bodies were found, others never were. I've often wondered what would have happened if that mechanic hadn't shown up when he did, if my children would still have a mother, or if I'd still have my son and daughter today. I'll never know. But I learned something that day. I'd always considered myself careful and aware of my surroundings, but exhaustion, heat, and being stranded far from home dulled my instincts. Friends and family still believe that day could easily have cost us our lives.